Welcome to the Playground Talks podcast, a podcast for busy parents who want to own their parenting style and develop a stronger sense of how to handle challenging situations. I am Tammy Afriat, your host and a mother of 3. In this podcast, I will interview psychologists, practitioners, behavioral therapists, teachers, and other experts about topics that bother all of us as parents, so you can get both the parenting principles and practical aspects that resonate with you, give you confidence and joy. Hey there! In this episode, Erica Smilgenski, my dearest and thoughtful friend, interviewed me so you can get a better understanding of why did I do this podcast and why did I come up with the parenting podcast. I hope you will enjoy.
So Tammy, let's start with, tell us about your journey on how you arrived here and then how you arrived to podcasting.
So about 6 years ago, my husband got a job offer, and we always knew that if there will be any kind of relocation opportunity, we'll do it because it will probably be a great adventure where you can learn more of someone else's culture and get to know new people. So it's a growing opportunity, and that's why we actually had a month to pack up everything, 2 kids, 10 suitcases, and we came to the United States.
Yeah. So now that you've been in the US for 6 years, what are you surprised about that you never expected living here?
I think when I moved, I did not think how lonely I would feel, at the beginning at least. I guess that was the first thing that I was surprised by, because I was surrounded by so many nice people, welcoming people, but it takes some time until you build the trust and you create your own community. And so I felt really lonely. And I think that was the most surprising thing.
I can see that. So I'm curious how podcasting came about. Was that sort of a way to potentially fill that loneliness or that void?
It's actually, everything started with the pandemic when 3 years ago I delivered my 3rd child. And I stayed with him for a whole year in the house. I felt like I'm blessed that I'm having the opportunity to stay with him and nurture him, because baby really needs his mom for the most part. So I did that. And after a year, I was like, okay, I'm done. It's about time for me to go back to my career as an environmental engineer. And he went to the daycare. However, I think it was 2 or 3 months later, I got all of my 3 kids back home. And at that moment, I was exhausted, meaning I did not have the capacity and the patience I would always have to have them and listen to them and nurture them. I was like, oh my gosh, I did not plan this part. Relocating was hard, but I chose it. Pandemic, no, I did not choose it. And I think it was more traumatic for me, this pandemic part of my life, than relocating. Anyway, I needed to make this shift in my mind to be the mom that I want to be. Not only to be the mom, but also to be a teacher. Because now I had a kindergarten, and then he was a 1st grader that we had many challenges dealing with school. So I just decided, okay, if I'm not going to pursue my engineering career, then I'm going to take parenting as important as a career. And so I started diving in and learning more. And that's where the podcast came in. I started listening to podcasts in many things like CBT and medical things, because it was pandemic. I wanted to know more, and I gained knowledge, and I listened for stuff for fun. And it really filled me up and helped me to get the motivation and the energy and the knowledge, like everything I needed. So it saved me. I could put my earbuds and feel that I have no kids around me for 30 minutes when I listened to whatever it was. So I think that was actually the time when 2 things happened. First, I was really happy that there is this platform calling podcast that I can gain so much from. And also I dived into how can I be a better parent and a more educated parent. And that's it. That's what led me to say, okay, so I want to do podcasts myself as well. I want also to be part of this amazing tool that's available to anyone.
I love that. I echo that sentiment that, being an avid listener of podcasts for so long, you do have access to resources you wouldn't normally have. And they're so giving and sharing their information and their experiences and their stories and ideas. It's fascinating. And so I have so much gratitude towards it. Tell us a bit more about Playground Talks. That's your podcast. Would love to know who's it for. What can they expect?
So the Playground Talks podcast is for busy parents who wants to own their parenting style and principles. And I want to start with the busy part. I remember myself working a full-time job and making it as a 2-shift, one in the morning, starting early, taking my kids then till the afternoon we were doing stuff. And it was really important to me to be present with my kids. So later at night, I would work and complete whatever I needed to work on, many times until midnight. So I truly understand and know how is it to struggle with managing the house and being with the kids. And even if you have something and you want to make the research, you don't necessarily have the time and the availability to do it. And as I mentioned before, I believe that being a parent is a second career, if not the first career. You need to have so many skills and knowledge. You need to negotiate with your kids. You need to know about child developmental stage. And you also need to be a psychologist. And that's just the beginning. So I really think that parents could use some reliable resource to be a better parents and to feel complete with their parenting style. And that's why I picked parenting as my topic for the podcast. And I'm willing to give those tools to my listeners.
Oh, I love it. I wish I had you in my earbuds when my daughters were younger. I would have loved to. And I can enjoy you now while my daughters as teenagers, but just it is a really, to your point, it's the hardest job I've ever had is being a parent, but it's hands down the most fulfilling and rewarding. I wish the rewards were a little more often these days, but it's, and to your point, there's so much to understand, and there's not a book. There's not a Parenting for Dummies book, although there might be these days, but there's just not those kinds of resources. And I'm so happy that you chose this topic because there's definitely a need for it.
Yeah, it's like you don't have a license to be a parent, but you actually need a lot of little licenses for so many topics. So it's funny. And it also reminds me that I think every parent has this moment when his child is throwing a tantrum and he feels low confidence and hopeless and sometimes frustrated. And I want for the people who listens to my podcast to replace those hopeless feeling with confidence and joy. And this comes when you know what do you want to achieve and you know how do you want to do it. When you have a plan, then a tantrum is a teaching moment for your child and for yourself. It's not a big deal. And that's what I want for my listeners. I just want them to say, okay, now I get it. I know how to deal with this specific tantrum. But if it's not the specific example that we were talking on the podcast, but something else, that they will have the background and the principle they could apply to other challenges in their life.
Yeah, and there's so many of those principles that carry through to any age, so it really is so relevant and carrying that principle through regardless of where your child is in their development or even their age. And I would add that hearing you listening to one of your kind of bonus episodes that you've sneaked out before your big launch is just hearing your voice as that kind of cheerleader, insightful, intelligible resource while I'm folding clothes just is such a good feeling to know that there's someone that's with me along the journey. And you bring in such amazing experts that share those principles. And it's just such a gift that you're doing this podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's my intention to give reliable resources so parents could actually say, I resonate with that and I'm going to try it and see if it works or not. Which is another part in my podcast. It's not that I'm coming with a specific agenda. Of course, I have my own, principles that I'm using and works for me and for my kids. But in the podcast, I'm willing to bring few, let's say, approaches so every parent could pick whatever works for him. So, and just to be more specific, let's take, do you know these N words? I recently heard that there are people who doesn't say no to their kids. It's the N word. So that's one approach that one may embrace. And I will have someone talking about boundaries, because saying no is to set a boundary. And so I want to have someone, a psychologist, coming and say, what's the impact of setting the boundaries? Why is it important for your kids to have boundaries? And then once the listener decided he wants to set the boundaries and saying no is okay, then I want to open the spectrum and say, now, do I want to be the parent who says no to every single thing to my child? Don't get the clothes dirty. Don't eat sugar. Don't run. Don't yell in the house. Do I want to be this person, or I want to use something else? So what would be the other things? What would be the other options? And then that's what I want my listeners to have the spectrum of saying, yeah, you can say a lot of no, but you can also find the other ways to give the other options and replace the don't eat the sugar to, oh, look, there is a banana and apple here. How about having one of those? So that's my intention, is really to give my listeners a variety of options to approach topics that we're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I love that example just really shows, I know one of your kind of pillars in how you want to come through your podcast is around compassion and curiosity. And that's just such a beautiful example of how you can learn to say no from a compassionate place. I love that. Can you tell us about a time that you received probably what you would say your most profound parenting advice that you still carry forward with you to this day?
Well, I think it wasn't really an advice. It was just a state of mind that before I even had a colleague of mine, and I think I mentioned it a few times in the episodes. So he said to me, do you know what? When you have kids, you'll see they are the best mirror of yourself. And I was like, interesting. And I kept it in my mind. And when I had my first child, then I started realizing and being really aware to myself and asking every time that we have some kind of a conflict, I'm asking myself, is this something that I am struggling with? Is this something that bothers me? Or is it really something that it is my role as a parent to discipline or educate or give that approach? And I think that was the first thing. That's a kind of advice. And the second thing is role modeling. It all starts with how you react, respond. What do you do? If your child is yelling and you yell it back, don't yell. It's ridiculous. You just can't do it. It's a conflict. The kid is really confused after doing it. So it's one example. Or if you said to your kids, you need to eat healthy, but he sees you all the time eating chocolate and ice cream and grabbing cupcakes, again, it's two different messages, the one that you really do and the one that you say. So I'm really aware of being a role model. And I also read a research saying that 80% of the things that the kids are learning from us are not verbal. It's not the thing that's, oh, now I'm going to teach you something. No, they're just watching us. They observe us and they get stuff. So I would say those are the two things. which comes down to be aware of yourself and be a role model.
Yeah, that's so poignant of just they truly are mirrors for us, and they help us create that awareness. And, it's such a good reminder too that we are role models. Even the nonverbal communications really come through probably stronger than sometimes those verbal ones. So often I know I look externally for guidance as a parent. I already kind of revealed that by popping in my earbuds and listening to a podcast. But can you tell us a time that you looked internally and really trusted your gut or sort of that mother's intuition to address some parenting struggle or to meet your child where they were at in that moment?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest struggle with my son with sleep training, I first used the method I used with my daughter and it didn't work. And I felt it's not working and it's just not right for him. And so I moved to the other strategy and I moved to the other strategy, and I followed my instinct saying that something is it's not going smoothly as it should, and it's not his fault. There's something going on. And down the road, he was diagnosed with sleeping disorder, meaning that many kids with ADHD has problem with sleeping. So I didn't have the diagnosis. I just trusted my instinct saying, there is something going on here.
Yeah. I appreciate you being so, vulnerable and sharing that, because I feel there's a lot of us parents out there with a similar type of child, and, their worlds move much faster and they need different support. And so and we're blessed to have so many different options these days to help, including this podcast, Playground Talks.
Well, before we got the diagnosis, my association for spatial needs was people with physically constraints. And then when I got into academic challenges, that it didn't make sense to me that it's so hard. And I had my daughter, so it was totally different experience. Again, you're talking about instinct. I could feel that these academic challenges for my daughter are not the same as for my son. I could feel that the approach that I'm using with her it's just not working. I need to switch that. So my point is, today I'm looking at kids with special needs, having dyslexia, ADHD, all those kind of things. They do need someone else to provide and to help them process all the information in a different way. And that's what it means. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about maybe in the second season of what is special needs and how can you tell that your child needs something and that his peers is doing pretty quickly and smoothly, but your child is not. So I was just pausing about this topic because, as you can tell, it's something that I was amazed.
Yeah.
Learning what a resource teacher is and what is she doing and how does she do it versus general education.
Yeah. Their rules are different on how they learn and the support they need and the structures they need to support them with. I like to sometimes think of special needs as special gifts. And a lot of us, the rest of the world, finds those gifts sometimes challenging. And so we like to label them. And when you can think of those gifts as their unique way they show up in the world and adapt, to your point, using the mother's intuition, it just really allows them to shine and not feel dull. So I think and you emphasize another point that I think just really comes through in talking with you is we are unique beings. And so as a parent, you do have to adapt to what worked for your daughter. Doesn't mean it's going to work for your son or even your third child. Like, we're each so unique in the way we show up and the unique gifts that we bring that it makes parenting, as we said from the beginning, some of the hardest things you'll have to do. And even if parenting is your one focus, which would be so magical, you're still a really busy mom. It's just, yes, so much there. So how have you leveraged playgrounds to have meaningful connections with other parents?
Oh, I love going to the playgrounds. You always get to meet people, and then if you meet them over time, the trust is built again, and then you can really share. And then I think it's natural when you're sharing stuff and you're being more vulnerable that you get more insightful conversation and some good tips and ideas. So I actually love going to the playgrounds. And it all depends if I don't need to chase my kids. Yeah. When they're little, you just chase them. But as they grow up, it gets easier.
Yes. Or you just find the playgrounds that are fenced in.
Or you use the swing. This is, I think, the sweet spot for the parent. Then you can have a nice talk.
Yes. Oh my.
Grown
yes.
up talk.
And oh my gosh. What's something that, you just really want your listeners to know and to, your hope for them when they listen to you and your podcast?
I want them to switch their hopeless or frustration moment to a confidence and a joy in their parenting journey, that they will really feel that they have the tools, and that each problem that they are facing doesn't seem the end of the world. It's just something in the way. And that's what I'm hoping for my listener to get out of the podcast. It's you listen and say, wow, I got it. I'm going to try it. And then they do it. And then they can email me and say what worked, what didn't work, and share with me more struggles. And I will be really happy to get those emails and provide more answers according to the open communication we have.
Oh, I love this. What's, just thinking of that comfort and confidence and joy of parenting, what's something that you had growing up and you received from your parents that you really want to carry through? Maybe it's a tradition that's unique to Israeli, or maybe it's just something you've adapted on your own that you really want to offer your kids.
I really appreciate that my parents did not push me to do anything. I was just curious of doing and learning, and they let me do it. I played the piano and I danced, and I was guiding in like a youth group. So I did all of that, and I had the freedom to try all of things. So I'm really appreciative for that freedom. Yeah. And I want to talk about confidence and curiosity that you mentioned. I think that the basic foundation as a parent is to approach your kids and yourself from a compassion point. And the compassion is actually the emotion. And you can teach someone how to feel something, but you can't tell him what to do, how to behave. So curiosity is actually the behavior. So I would say, let's ask the kids, why did he do? And honestly, I don't think a 1-year-old is not going to answer you. So I'm saying when they get bigger, then you ask the question, why did you do it? And you come from a curiosity point of view, and then the compassion part will come naturally when you get used to ask this question. And I'm going to go back to the ADHD example, because many kids and adults, my friend even, that had ADHD or still has it, they were labeled as lazy. Someone was looking and judged them and say, you're lazy. You're not sitting and learning because you're lazy. The truth is that if someone would come from a compassion and would ask, why do you choose to jump all the time? Then he would say, it's hard for me to sit. And my son told me, he was only 7 years old, but he was like, Mommy, it's hard for me to sit. Or he says, that's boring, that it's not interesting for me. So I am the parent and I'm going to put the boundaries and say, you're expected to learn. I'm not going to give up, but at least I'm giving him the opportunity to talk and advocate for himself and express his needs. Kids are doing things because they're struggling with something. They're not just kicking or throwing tantrums. So that's, I guess, the compassion and the curiosity part that I think is the foundation for everything with your child and with yourself. And then on top of it, you add the confidence and the joy, and hopefully you will be a grandparent saying, wow, being a parent was fun.
Yes. I hope I feel that way through these teen years. They are really grippy. And I have such compassion for those kids that have been labeled or diagnosed with a condition that, especially when you feel like, I'm not sure, to your point of mother's intuition, like maybe that's not quite right, or it feels really cagey and limiting. And I just always have this wonder or this curiosity is if you allow them to create and exercise that muscle for them, whether it's making something, coloring something, drawing something, forming something with their hands, that would provide the interest perhaps for your son that can fuel that, keep his candle lit while he has to still work in the confines of the educational system we have. I like to kind of use this analogy of keep your light lit while you play this game of hopscotch at school. Like you have to just play the game and follow the rules. And to get from one point to another, you have to jump through these squares to do that. And you can also create something that's just so exciting for you. And when you can come from that place of compassion and be curious to ask your son or ask your daughter what those things might be for them, especially at that tender age, they don't have all the filters and they'll tell you, like, I really want to, jump to the moon. Like, well, let's find a trampoline, indoor trampoline place, or let's find a trampoline to have at the house where you can jump to the moon. And, it's just so much there. But, tell us how your listeners can learn more about you and just the benefits of your insights and the guests that you bring onto your show.
I would say my Instagram, follow me on Instagram. This will be the best resource to get the content that I'm putting and sharing. And also feel free to reach out to me directly. And at some point, we'll have also a newsletter where I also collect researches. So make sure to connect with me through playgroundtalks2@gmail.com, because there will get a lot of content there from there too.
And make sure to subscribe to Playground Talks podcast and follow you on Instagram and all those lovely places. And can you give us a sneak peek of some topics that you have queued up for coming episodes?
Of course. Well, we have someone who is a martial art expert, but also has a background in psychology. So he made this great tool that really helps you to combine between the principles and the actual tips of how to build your resilience, your child resilience, how to work on awareness. So this one thing that I'm really excited to have. And I have a preschooler teacher that shared so much good tips. It's just gold. I can't believe how much good stuff she just put out there in the episode. I'm really happy when a psychologist that actually is talking about teenagers. And she was brilliant as well. Give great approach for parents to how to deal with this transitioning to adolescence
and all that adulting, pre-adulting stuff that they're faced with.
And there are more. I will post it on my Instagram, so follow me and you can tell everything that comes.
Yes, Tammy, tell us again your Instagram handle.
It is Tammy Afriat.
Before we wrap up, I know that you enjoy cooking and hiking, and I share those interests. So I have to ask, how do you integrate those enjoyments with your parenting tactics?
Well, I'm a big fan of saying that a parent is not required to do stuff that he doesn't like with his kids because it shows up. So if a parent doesn't like going to the playground, then make someone else go to the playground with your kid, but you need to ask yourself first, what do you like to do? So I like cooking and I like hiking. And so I'm asking my kids, do you want to cook now? And most likely they will say yes. Like the whole three of them really likes being in the kitchen and help. My daughter is actually independently making stuff. So it's actually just suggesting, do you want to join me? And the same thing with hiking. So eventually, when you like to do something and you're so enthusiastic about it, then whoever likes it comes and join. And I am also being flexible. There are stuff that I am doing which is not as bad for me. I wouldn't do it by myself, and I do it with my kids.
Yes, and that's just so beautiful of how the things that your parents taught you to have this space to try things, that's exactly what you do for your daughter with hiking. You allow her the space to join you, and if she doesn't want, then she's able to bow out. And that's just so, so beautiful. Your brightness is so beautiful. I'm so excited. I had the pleasure and honor of interviewing you. What else do you want to offer, or any final thoughts that you want to tell your listeners?
No, I just want to thank you for coming and being with me, because I told you before, and I'm going to say it over and over again, you are a great listener, and also you're such a thoughtful person that I really enjoy talking to you every time. So thank you for doing
Absolutely
it.
My pleasure. Be well.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And as I mentioned during the episode, I am more than happy to hear from you, your feedback, what you're struggling with. So please contact me through the Instagram and the email, everything on the show note. And in the meanwhile, remember to treat yourself and your kids with compassion and curiosity. Bye!